Mask of a Diva, a Stan Kraychik mystery, Book 4, 1994. Author, Grant Michaels. Publisher, St. Martin's Press, New York. Author, Eric Aust. For all the divas, operatic and otherwise. Chapter 6. It was only when I was inside the cottage that I realized the significance of the lamp being on, for I hadn't turned it on when I'd left earlier. An automatic timer. I thought simply, but there was no device attached to the lamp's power cord. Someone had purposely done it. Perhaps Maurizio, the young handyman, like a thoughtful hotelier. He had switched on a lamp to make the empty cottage seem more homey on my return. Perhaps he'd even turned the bed down for me. I smiled at that thought. Then my nostrils flared, for through the flower-drenched air of the small cottage, I perceived another scent, another person close by. I went toward the bedroom, but stopped short in the doorway. In the faint glimmer of lamplight from behind me, I made out the form of someone on my bed. It was Maurizio, lounging comfortably in skimpy white breeze. His appealing scent filled the small bedroom. The air went still, save for a fierce pounding in my chest and against my eardrums. I saw a smile in the dimness. He swung his big muscled legs over the edge of the bed. Then he stood up and faced me. I would never clearly recall the step-by-step moments of what happened after that. It was a dream that switched abruptly from sanity to madness, from restraint to recklessness, without any of the intervening moments. My memory allowed only the dark image of his face in ecstasy and the sensation of his rough, hairy thighs against my smooth skin, and his sounds as he thrust himself against me. Then it was over, and he was gone. Chapter 7. I slept like the dead until my alarm clock went off at 7:15. I got up and showered, then headed to the mansion for breakfast. I found Daphne already out in the gazebo, enjoying the cool morning air and the glassy green ocean. Parker had just set out a huge basket of fresh-baked scones, classic currant, tangy ginger, and decadent pecan praline, along with a platter of sliced fruit and a big French press coffee maker. "Good morning," Daphne chirped happily to me. "Our musician guests are taking breakfast in their rooms, so you're stuck with me." "That's my good luck," I said. I sat down and dove into the basket of scones. I chose a pecan praline and slathered it with butter and orange marmalade. Daphne pressed the plunger on the coffee maker with a dramatic gesture. "Voila," she said. "I just love doing that." She filled my cup first, then as she filled hers, she cleared her throat and attempted a casual tone as she said, "Are you romantically involved with anyone?" "Yes," I answered. "That's too bad." "Not at all," I said, thinking of my man in Paris. Daphne explained, "I think Maurizio likes you." I sighed. Before the great conjugal drama of my life had begun, it seemed I was always playing Anna Magnani, causing dread and loathing in anyone I dared to pursue, no matter how simple my approach. I mean, I'd ask someone out to a movie, and they'd run for the airport. But then, after settling in with my lover, the tables somehow turned, and occasionally I found myself involved, however unwillingly, in the bizarre sport of "fuck me, I'm married." "I get more attention since I met my lover," I said. Daphne replied, "That often happens. Just be kind to Maurizio. He may seem strong, but he's timid and vulnerable." "Not last night he wasn't," Daphne went on. "He'll be driving you all down to the performance center in a little while." Then she inhaled deeply and exclaimed, "To think that today marks the beginning of the home stretch. Everyone is finally here, and the rehearsals can start taking place in the opera house. Less than 2 weeks to opening night. Imagine!" All I could imagine was my grueling work in the bowels of the new opera house, toting wigs for Daniel, the demon diva. We finished our breakfast, then Daphne walked with me to the front of the mansion. There under the portico stood Madama Ostinata and Maestro Toscanelli, chatting in Italian. Maurizio was trying to coax the two musicians to board the minivan. They didn't seem to understand that the limousine was long gone and the minivan was now their mode of transport. Mathilda stood by silently. When Maurizio saw me, he left the others and came to me. He was as frisky as a puppy. It was friendly, but reserved, as rousing as his impromptu visit had been the previous night. I didn't want to encourage a repeat performance. I wanted to be faithful to my lover in Paris, though I suppose it was a bit late for moralizing. Still, it had been innocent and playful with Maurizio, sort of, and I hadn't really hunted him down. It all just happened, so in my heart, if not my mind and body, I was still faithful. Maurizio must have sensed my thoughts because he stopped himself short of touching me. I knew all he needed was a sign, some molecular clue that I wanted more of what had transpired just hours before, and I did feel a strange affection for him, and especially his direct approach to sex. Or was it pity? I was feeling because of his impairments. I was about to extend my hand to him and touch his arm, a simple, friendly gesture that, honestly, would have meant much more to both of us, but then I heard my new mantra, monogamy, 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 and I pulled back too. Immediately, Maurizio's eyes filled with tears, and he turned and ran off. It all took but a few seconds. Daphne said to me with a fleeting grimace, I warned you, he was emotional. I was about to go after Maurizio, but Daphne stopped me. It's best if you let him be. He'll reason it out on his own. But for now, would you mind driving the others into town? Not at all, I said. It was the least I could do since I'd scared off the designated driver. So I herded the others, Madama the Maestro and Mathilda, toward the minivan. The Maestro asked me for a light for his cigarette. Die Assendri? I pointed to the minivan. I'm sure there's one in there, I said. He nodded amiably and went to light his cigarette, but Madama Ostinata looked at me uneasily. You are coming too, she said. I'm driving you, doll. I hope you will not make us late. Her English was getting better and better. Then Daphne said, Where is Bruce David? She called Parker and asked him to get the tenor. But Parker replied, Mr. David apologizes that he is not quite ready, and he will join you all at the Performance Center. Oh dear, said Daphne. I'm worried about him. It's one thing to miss the reception last night, but he simply cannot miss today's rehearsal. It's the first time the principals will be singing together. I saw Maestro Tascadelli's eyebrows rise dubiously as if he recognized a behavior pattern that was familiar among the precarious male voices known as tenors. Daphne said that she would drive Bruce David down to the opera house herself when he was ready. I felt a slight twinge of jealousy. My place as her favorite guest was already being usurped by a temperamental, if invisible, tenor. The maestro helped Madama Ostinata onto the minivan's plumpy, cushioned middle bench. Then Mathilda scrabbled her way into the cramped back row, and finally we were off. During the drive to town, I tried to catch bits of the subdued conversation between Madame Ostinata and the maestro. My Italian is limited, but I've learned that the true message is often carried by the inflection as much as the words and grammar. It seemed that Madama was concerned about her career, especially with this new production of Balla. It was too controversial, she complained. Troppo controversio e moderno. Madama seemed to requite extraordinary encouragement from the maestro, which he seemed only too willing to give. She sounded almost like a child, while the old man cooed comforting words to her and called her Marcella and Mia Carla. But despite her concerns, I gleaned that the maestro believed his cara had grown dependent on him. Too much, he said. You must rely on yourself again like the old days. After all, who will be there when you are Tosca next fall? Madama answered with operatic intensity. To Angelo, she declared. To me, Salvami. I sensed the maestro would easily succumb to her feminine wiles. Then the minivan jolted to a halt. Madama shrieked, then began jabbering in English of all things. I will be late for the press. The press? What about rehearsal? What about food and water? The maestro made some remark about how all machines break down, including himself. He added with a hearty laugh. I tried to restart the van a few times, but nothing happened. No starter motor, no click, no nothing. Zip. Which I quickly diagnosed as no electricity. Now, there are some laws of electromagnetics that even a hairstylist can savvy, such as when there's suddenly no juice, you check the fuses. Fortunately, since it was a new model van, the fuse box was inside the passenger compartment, which meant no dirty fingers for me. I checked the fuses, and sure enough, the one that protected the electronic ignition was open. I tried to remove the fuse, but it had been forced in place too tightly, and I wasn't about to split a nail prying it out. "Does anyone have a nail file?" I asked. My three passengers looked at me blankly. I mimed the motions of a manicure. "We Geminis are born actors," which caused Mathilda to speak from the distant regions of the back seat. "I have," she said, and she rummaged through her beaded reticule until she produced a fine French nail file. I'd have to be careful not to bend it. An artist has respect for his tools. When I did get the old fuse out, I found that it was the wrong type for the slot it was in. Too low a rating and too big a circumference. No wonder it had failed, and no wonder it had been stuck tight. I checked the glove box for spare fuses. None. If we were going to get moving again, I'd have to make a decision. I assumed there was nothing wrong with the ignition system, but only with the wrong fuse. It was showtime. I asked Mathilda, "How about a hairpin?" "Huh?" she said. Once again, my Marcel Marceau imitation worked, and it was soon filling the vinyl coating from a simple hairpin and fashioning it into a temporary fuse. There was a big risk in my ingenuity, however. My hand-fashioned fuse would probably withstand more current than 10 minivans could produce. It was like putting a penny in the fuse box at home. I hoped I wasn't about to melt the van's entire electrical system. I installed the makeshift fuse, then I said a silent prayer to the god of voltage regulators as I turned the ignition key. I heard the faint whir of the electric fuel pump as it filled with small reservoir in the fuel injection system. I turned the key further and the engine leaped to life. "Brava!" yelped the maestro. "Very clever." Madame Astana sighed with relief. She wouldn't miss her date with the paparazzi. After all, "Grazie a Dio!" she exclaimed. "You're welcome," I muttered back, but I wondered if Maurizio had purposely installed the fairly faulty fuse to set the stage for him to display his mechanical prowess and save us all, especially me. When we got to the performance center, there really was a small pack of reporters waiting to rush Madama Ostinata and the maestro. Madama seemed to encourage them. Strangest of all was that by that time, her English had become almost fluent. I traipsed downstairs to my dungeon, but found the door to the wig room locked. A note tapped outside read, "Sick today. Don't touch the wigs." Things were looking up. A Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.